Hi, JDL Brushes here, and this video is brought to you by the Marker Brushback. Alright, so now we have a toilet scene. I think it is some kind of toilet. And it's thankfully a super simple scene to work on. And yeah, I think I did this within 30 minutes. That's not bad, you know, for a kind of presentable sketch. I think it's a good enough time frame to work on. And whenever I do my these kinds of sketches, I make sure I spend a minimum of at least 30 minutes and a maximum of an hour. That's kind of where my sweet spot is. If it's too little or too less, like 15 minutes, I'm like, this sketch doesn't end up as good or presentable. And when I go over an hour, I'm kind of, you know, I'm not, I'm more of a quickie kind of guy, you know, kind of, I just want to get it done, you know, and move on. And stuff. So as you can see, my rough sketch is super simple because again the reference is simple, and from there I can just proceed with the flats. And whenever I do my renderings within my selections, I do make sure that the way I render those flats, it has a I make sure it has a kind of marker feel, rendering feel to it. And all you have to do is kind of search online for marker renderings, whether it be fashion, interior design, architectural design, landscape design, product design. And we generally have a way of doing it where we kind of do it stroke by stroke, right? And it does give that that kind of a notable aesthetic to marker renderings, right? This time I did something different with the kind of walls in the side. I normally would just render them vertically, but I wanted to go I wanted the strokes to kind of follow the perspective, and it's close enough. I think. And yeah, I did a couple of tries, I believe, and I did leave a little more white space than I would normally would, and but it's okay, you know, it turned out okay in the end. But sometimes I do like to experiment with how I would render a space with these kinds of videos. So yeah, not bad. So now you can see me work on, I'm not sure what those black things are, some kind of I don't know. I don't know what they are. Maybe it's some kind of storage thing to kind of place in some towels. I'm not sure, but it's quite aesthetic, you know. And I wish I had more context for this scene, because I'm not sure where the water closet is. You know, where you take a piss and shit. So it looks weird and very kind of mysterious to me. So now you can see me work on some of the more finer lines, and I usually go for the edges to kind of fix it up in a way, or to kind of pull those different flats together. And I usually go for the whites and some kind of darker line. And again, when I do my darker lines, I make sure I just, or my rule of thumb is to just pick out the darkest value of the sketch and use that as the maximum darker value for all of my darker lines. So yeah. And for the white lines, I just like I like to use some white lines because it reminds me of those white gouache kinds of finishing touches when you do renderings, and yeah, it looks cool. And now you can see me work on the darker shades, and when I do my darker shades, I make sure that I have them in a multiply moded layer or group. And now I'm actually focusing on or trying to create that kind of gradation of values. You can see me in the kind of left corner. I did try to create that kind of a gradation of dark to light, and I am basing this off the reference photo. And I didn't actually change much from the original reference because it is kind of simple, and I was like, I don't think I can change it anymore. It's good enough, and it's actually a simple design, and I actually had fun with this thing because it is kind of easy, right? And now you can see me work on the lighter shades, and when I do my lighter shades, I make sure that they are in an overlay mode, and it does bring out the lighter aspects of each color. And doing this thing with dark shades and the light shades, it adds more value variety in your piece. Yeah. And I think it just helps add an extra kind of dimension to your work. Because if you just use the kind of original flats, well, it looks flat, right? So yeah. So now I'm working on the adjustment layers, and I adjusted the color balance, the hue and saturation, and some of the leveling of the sketch. And I make sure to kind of bump up the saturation. I go for often 25% up, and then for the color balance, I like to bring out the blues and the purples for the shadows. And then for the rest, if the sketch is looking kind of dull, I kind of bump up the temperature by increasing the reds and the yellows in the midtones and sometimes the highlights. And for me, that's kind of my aesthetic inclination. So yeah. So here you can see me use a kind of a clipping mask thing where I would create a different version of the sketch where it's heavily blue and purple, and then I would use the clipping mask to help kind of specify where I would want those blues and purples to show up. And it's not as noticeable, but there is a difference where the darker parts do have a kind of purple blue tint to it. So yeah. So now I'm going to go for the color dodge tool and the burn tool as a way of finishing up my sketch. Now, the sketch right now is already kind of okay, and you don't really need to add the kind of color dodge and the burn tool effects. But I think it adds more gradation or gradients in terms of values. And yeah. Now again, when I work on the color dodge tool, or with the color dodge tool and the burn tool, I make sure that I'm working on the kind of flattened version of the entire sketch, because that's the only way you can use the burn tool and the color dodge tool, and that's with one layer. So make sure you flatten out all of the layers below in a new version, and you're basically done. And I think I did add the kind of spotlights on top of the ceiling. And there you go. That is the sketch. Whichever your art, whatever your tool, make it beautiful.